The moment my grandfather stepped out of the cab, Sunset Grove felt different, quieter, like the wind itself was watching him. He was dressed plainly, an old canvas jacket, dark jeans, and worn sneakers. Nothing about him screamed importance. Yet every neighbor seemed to pause as if they sensed something beneath the surface. And maybe they did. Maybe some part of them recognized what I hadn't yet. That Tom Sterling wasn't just a retired man coming to visit his granddaughter. He was something else entirely. Still clipping your hedges like a rookie, he teased as he reached the porch, tossing his duffel at my feet. You cut too close to the root. They'll die by fall. I roll my eyes. Hello to you too, Grandpa. He grinned. That crooked, half-smirk I hadn't seen in years. We hugged, and I noticed his grip lingered longer than usual. Maybe he felt it too. The tension in this neighborhood. The way eyes followed us from behind freshly polished windows. I'm not used to HOA country, he muttered under his breath, scanning the street like a man memorizing an enemy's terrain. People here smile too wide. At the time, I laughed it off. Just another grumpy grandpa comment. But in hindsight, that was the first red flag. The next morning, he was up before dawn, seated quietly on the porch with a cup of black coffee and a folded newspaper he'd brought from another state. The sun hadn't even warmed the pavement yet, and he was already watching the cul-de-sac like it held answers. You expecting trouble? I asked, still half asleep, stretching in the doorway. He didn't look at me. Always. That was my grandfather, paranoid in the charming, old-school way. The kind of man who memorized exit routes in restaurants and never sat with his back to the door. I always thought it was leftover habits from some desk job in the government. He claimed he'd worked in logistics, a term so vague it could mean anything from supply management to international espionage. I never pushed him for details. That morning, Trouble arrived wearing lipstick and pearls. Her name was Samantha Harrison, and she walked up our driveway like she owned every square inch of Sunset Grove. Mid-40s, blazer too sharp for this heat, clipboard tucked under her arm like a badge of authority. "Good morning," she chirped, her smile straining her cheeks. "You must be Mr. Sterling. I'm the president of the Sunset Grove Homeowners Association." My grandfather stood slowly, nodded once. "Morning." Samantha glanced at me, then back at him with a rehearsed tone. "We just like to keep things neat around here. Safety, property values, community standards." She handed him a form with a yellow post-it, $500 visitor registration fee. I blinked. "Wait, what?" She smiled at me like I was a child. "It's standard. Any guest staying longer than 10 days must register. Helps with insurance, liability, you understand." Grandpa tilted his head. "And if I don't?" "Oh, I'm sure a fine gentleman like yourself wouldn't want to make things difficult." It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Sweet, tight-lipped, and laced with warning. Her gaze lingered on his jacket, his scuffed shoes. Judging, calculating, and something in my grandfather's posture changed. Not visibly, not dramatically, just subtly. He folded the form neatly in half and handed it back. "Appreciate the information." Samantha's smile cracked just a little. "We expect payment by tomorrow evening. Penalties accrue daily after that." Then she turned and walked off without another word. I looked at Grandpa. What the hell was that? His eyes followed her until she disappeared around the corner. Then, still staring, he whispered, "That wasn't about rules. That was a shakedown." And in that instant, something inside me shifted. The sunlight felt colder. The neighborhood felt staged. And the man sitting beside me, my gentle, quiet grandfather, no longer felt like a visitor. He felt like the only person who truly understood the fight we were about to walk into. The next 3 days unraveled like a slow-burn thriller. Quiet, almost routine, but with an unease that seeped into the corners of every conversation. Grandpa didn't speak much about Samantha, but he watched everything. Every jogger who passed by twice in the same hour. Every SUV that idled just a little too long. Every neighbor's polite smile that didn't reach their eyes. It wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Meanwhile, I tried to act normal. We baked cinnamon rolls. I showed him the mess my garden had become. We watched a documentary about forensic accounting, which I now suspect was less casual viewing and more of a warm-up exercise for him. But under the small talk, something darker was brewing. I knew it, and so did he. By day 4, the tension broke. A thick envelope was taped to our front door, hand-delivered, no stamp. Inside, a second notice, now listing a $500 visitor fee, a $25 per day penalty, and a compliance demand letter signed by Samantha herself. I read it out loud with a disbelieving laugh. Is she serious? Grandpa took the letter and studied it under the porch light like it was a crime scene photo. His jaw tightened. Who types legal threats in Times New Roman? I snorted. What? He looked up at me, dead serious. Real legal departments use standardized formatting. Fonts, spacing, watermarks. Every detail is intentional. This is a bluff. That was the first time I saw it. That glint in his eye that didn't belong to a retired old man sipping tea on a porch. It belonged to someone who'd been through wars of another kind. Wars waged with subpoenas, shell companies, and fraud rings. I had this sinking realization that Grandpa wasn't just good with paperwork. He was something else entirely. That night, he laid it out for me in simple terms. She's running a racket, he said, pulling out a spiral-bound notebook already filled with notes, sketches, and arrows. Targeting elderly visitors. Inflated fines. Manufactured compliance rules. All under the guise of community protection. I leaned over the notebook. And the HOA lets her get away with this? She is the HOA, he replied. President, Treasurer, Enforcement. She consolidated power. No versast. No deets. My stomach twisted. But why target you? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he flipped through public records on his laptop, tracing Samantha's name through multiple neighborhood associations, linked addresses, property filings. Then he said quietly, because she thinks I'm weak. She sees an old man with no fight left. No connections, just a pension. He paused. And she has no idea who she's trying to extort. That sentence hit me like a sledgehammer. I stared at him. Grandpa, who are you? He looked at me. Really looked. Then, gently, like he was handing over a secret I hadn't earned yet, he said, I used to work for the Bureau. Financial crimes. Retired early. But I still help from time to time. The pieces snapped into place. The way he watched people. The questions he'd asked about neighborhood finances. The calm when Samantha got aggressive. Your FBI was, he corrected. Now, I'm just a man who doesn't like bullies. A long silence stretched between us. You should have told me, I whispered. I didn't want you looking at me like a movie character, he said softly. I just wanted to visit my granddaughter, not drag you into this. But we were in it now. Because the next morning, Samantha didn't come alone. She brought 2 men. Broad-shouldered, 2 clean-cut, the kind who smile without warmth and stand like they've been trained to. HOA enforcement officers, she said as she handed over a new notice, $650 owed, immediate compliance required. Grandpa didn't flinch. He just asked one question. Can I see your credentials? The men blinked. Samantha snapped. They don't need to show you anything, Mr. Sterling. This is private security under civil ordinance. Then it's trespassing, Grandpa replied calmly. Unless you're licensed, insured, and deputized under municipal code. Samantha's smile faltered. Just for a second. But I saw it. We both did. After they left, Grandpa turned to me with a sigh. She's escalating. Next step? False enforcement. Fake authority. Maybe even cops. Fake cops. I said. He looked out at the street with cold precision. Worse. People who pretend to be them. It started with headlights. 2 sets, then 3, pulling in silently from both ends of our cul-de-sac. It was just after 8 p.m. I was halfway through a Netflix comedy, trying to pretend life was still normal, when Grandpa stood up from his seat by the window and turned off the lights. Phone's down. Stay low. I froze. Grandpa. He moved with a fluid precision that didn't belong to someone his age. He didn't yell. Didn't panic. He simply moved, curtains drawn, lights out, hand on my shoulder to keep me still. Outside, black SUVs idled with engines purring. Their windows were too dark to see inside, but I could feel it. Something wasn't right. And then, bullhorns. Thomas Sterling. Exit the premises immediately for questioning. This is a legal enforcement action. My blood turned to ice. I rushed to the front door, but Grandpa blocked me. No, but they're not police. I blinked. What? He pointed out the window, his voice low but sharp. No bikes. No marked vehicles. And look at their rifles. I squinted through the blinds. Rifles? Painted black. But you see that edge on the barrel? Orange underneath. They're airsoft. What the hell is going on? He exhaled slowly. They're staging a fake raid. Samantha must have hired them to force compliance. She thinks I'll panic. Full. Outside, a man in full tactical gear barked into the bullhorn again. Step out immediately. This is your final warning. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear. We need to call the police. Grandpa turned, already dialing. We don't call 911 for this. We call the real cavalry. I watched him enter a secure code into his old burner phone. Yes, my sweet, coffee-sipping grandfather had a burner phone, and speak in a clipped tone I didn't recognize. This is Sterling. Target location compromised. Suspected impersonators on site. Request urgent confirmation and backup. Authorization code Bravo, 2-1 Delta. He ended the call. No explanation. No time for one. Go upstairs. Stay in your room. Lock the door. I couldn't move. Grandpa. Alex, he said, with a kind of seriousness I'd never seen in him. If they come in, you do not try to help me. You hide. You survive. A wave of fear surged through me. And something else. Rage. No, I said. I am staying. We stood at the top of the stairs, peeking through the upstairs blinds. I watched the men in gear fan out, sweeping the perimeter. Samantha stood further back, flanked by a man in a gray suit. She wasn't smiling now. She was smirking, like a general watching her plan unfold. She thinks this is over, I whispered. Grandpa tilted his head. It is, just not the way she thinks. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I heard the fake officers shouting again. Threats. Demands. Someone even knocked, softly, like they wanted to bait us into opening. That's when I noticed it. Another car. Silent. Sleek. Sliding into the scene from the far end of the street. Unmarked but different. Purposeful. Grandpa. I pointed. He smiled. Just barely. Took them long enough. Moments later, without theatrics, a group of men and women in plain clothes emerged. No bujorns. No shouting. Just efficient movement. Tactical. Federal agents, one of them called out. All individuals on site, drop your weapons and place your hands on your head. Now. Samantha's smug face turned to ash. The fake officers scrambled, some dropping their gear, others frozen in place. Grandpa exhaled and stepped away from the window. Showtime. We ran downstairs. By the time we reached the porch, the entire street had transformed. Neighbors were peeking through windows. Phones were out recording. The fake raid had turned into a real one, and not in the way Samantha expected. Grandpa opened the door, calm as ever, and stepped out with his hands visible. A man in a dark blazer approached. Mr. Sterling? He nodded. Thanks for the punctuality. The agent nodded back. We've got it from here. And just like that, the illusion shattered. Fake SWAT. Hired intimidation. HOA power trip turned federal bust. And in the middle of it all stood my grandfather, stone-faced, steady, as if this had always been the plan. The street looked like a war zone the morning after. Crime scene tape roped off Samantha's house. Federal vehicles lined both sides of the road. Every neighbor who had once watched from behind lace curtains now stood in groups, whispering, pointing, pretending they hadn't cheered Samantha's HOA tyranny for years. Inside our home, silence settled like smoke after a fire. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing coffee that had gone cold, trying to process what had happened. The fake SWAT team, actors paid to intimidate us. The real agents, called in by my grandfather with one encrypted message. The network Samantha was part of, now crumbling under federal investigation. And yet, Grandpa sat across from me, methodically scanning a file folder like he was still in the middle of something. Not a scratch on him. Calm as ever. You knew it would get this far? I asked finally. He didn't look up. I knew it could. That's different. I pushed my mug aside, hard enough to make it spin. You should have told me. From the beginning. He finally met my gaze. His eyes weren't cold. They were tired. I didn't want to make you carry this, he said. You were safe. Until now. But I'm not. I whispered. And that truth sank like a stone between us. Because Samantha wasn't alone, and we both knew it. The documents the agents recovered didn't just expose a neighborhood scam. They traced connections, financial flows, forged signatures, shell companies, across 4 communities in 3 states. Elderly homeowners targeted through fake fines, phony inspections, escalating penalties. $2.3 million stolen over 3 years. And my grandfather? He'd known about this ring for months. I was tracking her, he admitted, voice low, before I even came here. Samantha's name came up in a different case. I needed a reason to observe her without raising suspicion. I felt the heat rush to my face. So, visiting me, was that just cover? No, he said quickly, fiercely. That was real. You were the only part that was. I believed him, but it still hurt. And then he added, but you need to understand something. This wasn't just financial fraud. We think some victims disappeared. I stared at him. Disappeared? He nodded slowly. Refused to pay. Reported things. Then vanished. No paper trail. No explanations. My stomach twisted. You think she was part of something worse? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. That afternoon, Agent Martin, tall, well-dressed, and disturbingly calm, arrived at our doorstep with a sealed file in hand. His tone was clipped. Tom, he said, we found it. In Torres's laptop. He called it a fallback protocol. Grandpa opened the file slowly. His face darkened with every page he read. What is it? I asked. Martin looked at me. Then at Grandpa. You haven't told her yet. Told me what? Grandpa closed the file. His jaw clenched. Vincent Torres, Samantha's backer, set up a contingency. If his operation ever got exposed, a second wave would be triggered. Retaliation. Retaliation? I asked. Against who? Martin answered, not even blinking. Against families of any known investigators. The air left my lungs. I stood up so fast the chair screeched across the tile. So now I'm a target. Neither of them denied it. Martin added, we intercepted chatter. You're already flagged. They think you're involved. I looked at Grandpa. We were supposed to be done. You said this was over. I said this phase was over, he replied, voice low. Not the war. Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I didn't sign up for this. I know, he said, but now you have to decide if you're going to run or fight. I sat back down, my hands trembling. The pressure in my chest was unbearable. But then I remembered something. The way Samantha froze when the real FBI arrived. The way the fake officers broke the moment they were exposed. The fear in their eyes when my grandfather stood calmly in the face of it all. I looked up at him, and for the first time, I saw him not as a relic of some old career, but as something more, a shield. And maybe, just maybe, I could be one too. Then teach me, I said quietly. His eyes softened. Teach you what? Everything. 3 weeks later, I stood in aisle 7 of the local grocery store, palms damp, heart drumming so loudly it almost drowned out the hum of fluorescent lights. I wasn't here for groceries. I was bait, and the wolves had arrived. 2 men flanked either side of me. Average height, clean-cut, business casual with just enough polish to blend in. Their posture was too stiff, their eyes too sharp, and their timing too perfect. Miss Sterling, the one on the left, said softly, like he knew me from somewhere. I turned. Do I know you? His smile didn't reach his eyes. Not yet, but we've been keeping an eye on you. Every part of me screamed to run, but I remembered Grandpa's voice in my ear last night. Keep them talking. The longer they talk, the more rope they give themselves. You're mistaking me for someone else, I replied, pretending to reach for a box of cereal. The man on the right leaned in just slightly. Your grandfather cost our organization a great deal of money. That creates debt. And your collateral. There was the line they rehearsed. The threat. The slip. I didn't blink. What organization? The first man smiled again. Same one that employed Vincent Torres. And Samantha Harrison. Thank you, I thought. Because that was all the FBI needed. I didn't see the signal. Didn't hear the cue. But suddenly the air shifted, and from behind stacks of produce and freezer doors came a storm of movement. For plain-clothed agents closed in with practiced ease, guns drawn but low. Customers screamed. A manager ducked behind the checkout counter. The men didn't fight. They didn't even speak. Just froze, because they realized too late that they were the ones who had walked into a trap. And I stood in the eye of the storm, heart racing, knees weak, but unbroken. Back at headquarters, I watched Agent Martin pace in front of the digital board, piecing together the final strands of a web that spanned across 12 communities in 6 states, funneling millions through HOA fraud fronts, intimidation schemes, and elder exploitation. We got their communications, financials, the entire offshore structure, he said, all tied back to the same international shell system Vincent used. Grandpa sat silently beside me, fingers steepled, eyes closed in deep thought. When he opened them, he simply said, "Then it's time." That evening, we sat in the living room again, just like we had that first week. But everything was different now. I wasn't the same girl who'd flinched at confrontation. I wasn't just his granddaughter. I was his partner. He handed me a folder, my name typed neatly across the top. FBI training referral? I blinked. "You're serious?" He nodded. "You've already done half the job. Time to make it official." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I just nodded, overwhelmed by a kind of pride I didn't have words for. Later that night, as I brushed my teeth and thought it was over, finally, truly over, my grandfather's phone buzzed again. A single encrypted message. "Priority alert, Maple Heights. Target is Maria Torres. She knows you're coming." He stared at it for a long time, not moving. "Who's Maria?" I asked, stepping into the room. He turned the phone toward me. "Vincent's sister," he said. "Smarter, more careful, and already waiting for us." I didn't speak. Neither did he. The silence stretched until finally I whispered, "Do we go?" He looked at me, not as a child, but as someone who'd earned the right to choose. "No one's forcing you. But if we do this, it's a different game." I stood in front of him, chin lifted, voice steady. "Then let's play it better." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile you give not out of victory but understanding, because what started as a quiet visit had turned into something neither of us could have imagined. And somehow, we were both exactly where we were meant to be. 6 months later, I stood at the front of a packed FBI conference room in Quantico. Room silent, every chair filled with agents, analysts, and trainees staring at the screen behind me. The headline read, "Operation Hollow Crown: How a Grandfather and Granddaughter Helped Take Down the Largest Elder Fraud Network in U.S. History." My hands didn't shake as I clicked to the first slide. Not anymore. "This started with one man," I said. "One visit. One demand taped to a front door. And it almost ended with me being kidnapped in a grocery store." A few in the crowd shifted. Some smiled tightly. Most didn't blink. "But what we found," I continued, "was that predators don't just use weapons. They use contracts, paperwork, smiles. They wear suits and call themselves neighbors." I let that land. We took down 23 operations across 6 states, recovered over $8.2 million. But money was never the real metric. The real win. I clicked again. Photos filled the screen now. Elderly couples smiling. Grandparents with their grandchildren. A handwritten thank you note that read, "You gave me my life back." That's what mattered. I stepped back. Agent Martin stood, taking over the briefing, and I slipped into the hallway where my grandfather waited, leaning casually against the wall, arms crossed, dressed in a blazer that couldn't quite hide how proud he was. "You were magnificent," he said. I smiled. "You think it's over?" He gave that crooked half-smile I'd come to know too well. "With people like Maria still out there? Not a chance." After Samantha's takedown and Vincent's exposure, Maria Torres Valdez had gone silent. No digital trail, no movement in her shell companies. She'd buried herself deeper than any of them. But she made one mistake. She started adapting her model to international victims. HOA fraud disguised as senior retirement investments. Elder relocation services. Protection plans with monthly premiums that disappeared into the void. What she hadn't accounted for was us. With every new strategy she developed, we countered it. Grandpa called it dancing with shadows. I called it war. But this wasn't just his war anymore. It was mine too. We created Sterling and Associates, a family-led investigative consultancy. Not flashy, not public, just effective. We trained law enforcement on elder-targeted fraud, consulted on international laundering cases, developed technology to track financial red flags in communities most at risk. Our motto was simple: criminals target the vulnerable, families protect each other, and the world noticed. We were invited to speak in Geneva, then Toronto, then Seoul. Our approach was replicated across 15 countries. We helped shape global elder protection laws. We even received the FBI Director's Commendation, an award I still don't feel like I earned, even as it hangs in my office beside Grandpa's old service badge. But even as the world changed, one thing didn't. Grandpa still drank his coffee on my porch every morning, still read the paper like it held secrets only he could decipher, and still kept a burner phone in the kitchen drawer, just in case. Do you ever miss it? I asked him once. The real field work. The old days. He looked out across the neighborhood, eyes scanning instinctively. I don't miss the danger, he said, but I miss the clarity, the line. I didn't understand at first. The line. He nodded. The line between right and wrong. When you're in the field, it's sharp, clean. People cross it, you stop them. But out here, he gestured to the quiet street, to the neighbors waving, the dog walkers and mailmen. People blur it. They steal slowly, quietly, while smiling. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours thinking about that line, and how easy it was to ignore until it found you. We hadn't heard from Maria Torres Valdez in over a year. But one day, a package arrived, unmarked, no return address. Inside was a single photo, a retirement village in the Cayman Islands, a new nameplate on the HOA office door, and a familiar face in the background, just out of focus. She knew we were watching. We knew she was waiting. But what she didn't know, what none of them ever understood, was this: the moment she tried to bleed another family, another grandfather, another granddaughter, we'd be there. Not with sirens, not with rage, but with precision and purpose and a promise: you picked the wrong family.